Hello, and welcome to American Amnesia. I'm your host, Cliff Garner. And the repercussions of this gas attack slash missile attack, whatever you want to call it, I think are going to be long term. However, I have my own opinion here that the facts of the matter really aren't going to be the relevant point. I do believe that the relevant point will be the perception of those facts and how that these things are handled henceforth in the papers and everything else. These kinds of things generally turn out to be public relations wars more than anything. I don't think it's necessary that there be continued strife between the U.S. and Syria to actually maintain an actual situation of war, possibly. That I guess probably goes without saying, but we've already established a couple things, and I think that so did President Trump, and I think that's really more of where we need to go for the key here. I do believe that this was a very Machiavellian decision, and it is secondary as to whether or not Assad himself had the gas used on the people in what is it, Idlib, I think it was something like that. It's secondary whether or not he used it or if the rebels did it to set up a false flag situation. What is going to be more important is how it's perceived by the world, and the world has already agreed on this perception that Assad, since he's capable of doing it, then therefore he must be guilty of it. That kind of assumption is false. It's a breach of logic, but it's not an uncommon one. It's one that's often made in the court of public opinion. And that's really what we have to deal with here. The court of public opinion is far more important than what the actual facts are. And this is a truth that I think we're going to find greatly benefits the president. It causes me to suspend my criticism somewhat to see how it pans out. Now, I know that my friend David is talking about the victims that are actually in hospitals in Turkey. I really don't know anything about that, but I do know that there are real people that have been harmed in this. And see, the problem with false flag is people misinterpret this concept. Okay. There is a real event. Gas was used by somebody on certain people, and they died as a consequence. Who is responsible is the question. A false flag doesn't mean it's a false event. Some people get this all mixed up. I don't know why they do. Because the word flag should be your big clue as to what this means. A false flag means that somebody is actually waving somebody else's flag saying we did it. This happens all the time. That there's a provocation, for example, of some kind. Well, if you stage the provocation and blame the enemy, That's a false flag. When the Gulf of Tonkin occurred, it was not an actual attack by the Viet Cong or Vietnamese, the Viet Cong on our ships there. It was faked, but it was blamed on the enemy. I think in that case there was actually not an incident. It was blown up to be one. But the key isn't that it didn't happen. It just didn't happen the way it was said. Okay, and so if you have somebody telling you that this is something that didn't happen, that's not necessarily so. They probably don't know what they're talking about. 9 times out of 10, if you're talking about a false flag, something actually occurred. In almost all cases, not every case, but in almost all cases. That was one exception, but there was also the Maine that triggered the Spanish-American War. That was blown up. It was sabotaged by American saboteurs in order to trigger the event. But it was blamed on the Spanish. You see what this is. You see how that works. Well, calling this a false flag isn't saying that there's nobody harmed. Just the question is who did the doing. Now, this one hasn't been proved, and I'm still waiting to hear more about what's going on there. But I think it's a pretty big clue when you have the guys from the white helmets, who we know are al-Nusra, who is al-Qaeda, okay, and they're running around and handling these bodies without gloves. That's not sarin. If they're touching anybody that's actually been hit with any kind of a chemical, this is actually happening a bit after the fact, and it's surely not sarin. Sarin gas is highly lethal, and there's no way on earth that's what it was. So with those pictures are total bull, BS. They're total bullshit. You can write those pictures off. The white helmets, write them off too, because they have been already shown to be not who they say they are. They're not our friends, although we might be paying them somewhere along the line. But they're definitely not our friends. So when we look at this, then there's some truths that we might come to find over the years, and maybe even months. But they're going to be irrelevant compared to how it's perceived, and it's already being perceived as Assad's fault. And the Russians are, I don't know, they've already kind of set up certain parameters. They're not happy with us by any means. We probably pushed their hand in some way, and we definitely didn't make them look good. They're not happy about that. But I think that there might be other things going on here, and there might be some agreements down the road. I don't see this as being insurmountable for peace in Syria. I also don't see it as being insurmountable as for replacing Assad, and the Russians being willing to go along with that, actually. That said, what does this take care of? Well, Trump has gotten rid of that whole Russian, the Russian bromance with Putin kind of thing. That's toast. That's toast. The MSN's lost the battle there, and the mainstream media is going to have to make adjustments, and you're going to see heads rolling. Don't be surprised if Maddow is one of them. Although not necessarily, but I wouldn't be surprised if she is. just because she stuck her neck so far out, and it's going to be hard for her to pull it back in. And that's the big loser right there. That whole narrative is going down the tube, and not a whole lot they can do to save it. It's gone. The people are speaking, and there has been great movement behind the scenes with the elites. There's been great change that has happened with their tone. Now, they're going to say this is not enough and blah, blah, blah. But they're going to start looking at results here. And they've gotten what they wanted so far. And it'll be interesting to see how things develop from here. But right now, the Russian backing Trump narrative is gone to poop. And the resistance that he has had is starting to fold. These are good things, especially for the president. As a person who voted for him, I'm glad to see those developments. I think they needed to fade, and we'll actually see at least, I think, what we would call progress. That things will improve somewhat. Maybe they can get around to fixing healthcare finally. That said, that point covered, let's move on to another thing. And this is something that's been bothering me since I became aware of it. And really, because the mainstream media was so whipped up into a frenzy over the false narrative of Russia, they missed completely the true narrative of Flynn connected to Turkey. And this, I think, is far more significant. And I think in the long run, this whole point is going to have more effect on the developments in the coming days, and how it's going to affect the Middle East. And the point being that Turkey is in the Middle East. Turkey is run by Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is the banner carrier for the collection of ideas that in other countries is called the Muslim Brotherhood. And it would take a while for me to explain this otherwise. I think I'd like to go back in time and show the historical perspective of how this formed. But the fact is, the AKP is the Muslim Brotherhood in Turkey. And it's because of the historical forces that were going on in Turkey as opposed to those going on in other countries in the Middle East. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the fact that the Turks are not Arabs, but rather with the political situation being what it was in Turkey. And that situation, particularly with the drive by the Republic, starting with Ataturk and maintaining on through up till actually the accession of the AKP in 2002, that the secularist policies of the state itself, for one thing, funneled it out of the religious realm but into the political And it didn't become one of these like secret societies or something like kind of the way the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt did, but rather it became more directly politicized, and as a consequence, because of the secularization of the Turkish politics, it also caused it to be it persecuted to a certain extent within politics, and a lot of the leaders would be not necessarily imprisoned, although Erdogan spent a time in prison himself. But more that the party itself would be busted down and discarded. I mean, it would have to they would mutate a little bit more. So what you had was a lot of these mutations that occurred in the AKP that permitted it that allowed it to survive, for one thing, but it also modified the nature of the Muslim Brotherhood philosophy and the way that they approached the politics. And so instead of being more of a revolutionary party or a group, it ended up being actually more of a vote-getting entity that participated in the electoral process and competed very well. And we have to give Erdogan a lot of credit for his political smarts. I mean, the guy is really crafty, and he's highly intelligent. There's other things we can criticize him for, but we can't take that away from him. He did do some things very well as far as government's concerned. I speak very highly of his health care. I'm extremely critical of the one we have here in the U.S., but the one that he implemented in Turkey, I think is greatly superior. I really do. I truly believe that. So, at any rate, with Flynn was in the pay of the Erdogan government. What effect this has behind the scenes, I don't think there's any way we'll ever quite discover. That he was removed from the office of running the NSC, I think is really telling. And the reason given that he did not fully cooperate with Pence, I think, is probably legitimate. He probably didn't say to the extent that he was actually bought off by the Turkish government. He probably didn't go into that. And then when this was coming out, and according to what I've been reading, it was actually fairly well known within the administration, which is probably why that they didn't have too many qualms of getting rid of him. And there was a lot of criticism. I myself included, I was a little bit uptight about that. It's like, well, why did you not back this guy? You bothered to bring him in. I mean, why didn't you back him? Well, I have the feeling it has a lot to do with Turkey. And when I became aware of that, it was like, okay, this is starting to make sense to me. That the Turkish government and paying him the way that they had, and actually having him tell people that he thought that Fethullah Gulen should be handed over to the Turkish government. But that's almost signing the old man's death warrant, actually. To make that suggestion, even after he's been released from his duties, they must have paid him a pretty penny. Or he believes in the cause, one or the other. Maybe both. Now, personally, I find the whole thing with Gulen inadequately explained. I don't think anybody is really told the story well as to what has happened. And I don't know where I'm lacking the ideas of what's going on. You know, I've done a lot of research, and I've done my best to understand it. And I have to say I don't completely, but I think I have a better grasp than most people. And the falling out with Gulen and Erdogan is going to be extremely significant to what was going on behind the scenes in Turkey when Gulen decided to unveil the degree of corruption that Erdogan had attained. And the fact is that he did do that. See, this is the same thing as the Democrats trying to ignore their own connections to Russia. You see, what they're doing with Russia trying to tag that on to Trump is projecting their sins onto him. And I think that Erdogan has this kind of thing himself, because he accuses Fethullah Gulen of overthrowing the government. And I don't think he had the means to do that. And furthermore, I have serious doubts as to whether the putsch, or whatever you want to call it, that occurred not too long ago in Turkey was his doing. I have the feeling that maybe it was Erdogan's, and that he recruited a few people that he knew that he could get to do it. There are so many examples of what I would call Byzantine politics, which, if you know the history there, you might get my joke. But the fact is that this Byzantine style of politics has never left Byzantium, which is ancient, the ancient name for Constantinople, or if you prefer, Istanbul. And that this style of cutthroat politics has remained in place there in a high degree, and that is unlikely to change anytime soon. The very cutthroat nature of it makes those who come to the top through that type of what do you call it, obstacle course, I guess, that they would prefer to leave that in place, because it becomes a defense once you get to a certain level. But the thing is that Gulen, by being out of the country, had always been at a disadvantage in this beauty contest between him and Erdogan, and that basically it was Erdogan and his bad faith, and also his bad deeds, that ruined the relationship between the two. These two founding fathers of the party. And Erdogan's lack of morals, or actually his rather bendable moral standards that have been useful to him, enabled him to ruthlessly take power and to take advantage of every situation that came his way, whereas Gulen was actually shoved to the side. And the moral power that he possessed, because he was not able to be in two places at once, he was unable to take advantage of it. So that's how he ended up in the cold. But the thing is that Erdogan doesn't want him to live, because he knows too much. And he knows where the bodies are buried. He knows where the money is and how it flows. That the thing was that when Erdogan made the final move towards ultimate power, he was moving against the CHP, JHP, the Social Democrats, the MHP, the MHP, the nationalists, against the Kurds and their various parties and entities, all the minorities of Turkey, and against enemies abroad. He moved very decisively, and did Gulen have anything to do with the putsch? Well, the issue is, it doesn't matter. Just like with the gas attack, it doesn't matter what Assad did this time. You know, we can look back at 2013, and chances are it was al-Nusra. And it was a false flag done by the Turkish government to try to get America to get involved in Syria. But does that matter? No. What is the perception now? The perception now about that gas attack in 2013 is that Assad did it. That's the perception. Assad did it. Erdogan went to Obama and said, that's one of your red lines. Come on, let's go. Now, my personal opinion, since I'm sure, in fact, I know it was a false flag. It was done to get us involved in Syria directly. And my personal opinion is that was one of the best moves that Obama did, was to refuse, and actually you send troops into Mali instead. Oh yeah, he sent them there. Not a whole lot. But you weren't told. You don't know that, America. Your perception is what counts. Right? What you think. What you think you see. Because you'll convince yourself that what you saw was something quite different. So consequently, everybody is tagging on Obama, when actually I personally think that was one of the best things he did. And everybody say, well, you believe in a conspiracy theory. No, I don't. No, I don't. There are facts on this. There are a lot of facts on this. You don't want to look at them. I didn't theorize anything. But the fact is that people don't want to talk about that. The narrative has papered it over. And the real truth is under the paper. But the perception, that which people see, that is what they're going to go by. So, did Fethullah Gulen overthrow the government of Turkey? No. I don't think he even was trying. I think he was trying to do what he thought was right and moral. Religiously moral, no less. That you don't steal. You don't, and a government doesn't steal from its people. But that is exactly what Mr. Erdogan has done. He's become a billionaire, for Christ's sake. A billionaire, not millionaire. Billionaire. He's one of the richest governmental heads of state in the world. And he came from Kasımpaşa, which is one of the poorest parts of the city in Istanbul. It's a bad neighborhood. I lived close to it. I know. Didn't want to walk around there at night. I did. But you didn't want to walk around there at night. That's what everybody told me. All the cab drivers, everybody else had told me I was crazy. Well, gee whiz, that was my nickname, Daily Abanja. Hi. The crazy foreigner. The crazy barbarian. So, the perception is what is important here. What do you see? What has been papered over? And what is everybody applauding? Well, we see that they're applauding Trump. Too late, Dems. Got to change the narrative. The bromance between Putin and Trump is gone. That whole thing is toast. Don't even worry about it. History. Fethullah Gulen is a criminal in Turkey, and that's the way it's going to be. As long as Erdogan remains in power. Now, he leaves power, the perception will change. And the facts will be brought out more and more to the fore, and everything else will get known. Possibly. But he's blaming the whole thing on Gulen, and Daily Sabah, it has its daily praise of Erdogan. I mean, over there, he's something short of Allah. Not much. And the fact is, Erdogan has people around him. You would call them sycophants. And they praise him and praise him and praise him. And they talk about him in ways that are unseemly. He's being compared to Muhammad and Allah. He's practically God. And in a good Muslim? Okay, you say so. The thing is that he's being spoken of in ways that nobody should be. He is looking at Israel. That's his goal. That's one of the reasons he and Gulen fell out. Could have put a little crimp on his interfaith dialogue, and that was his angle. Erdogan doesn't care about interfaith dialogue. He's bringing on the apocalypse. He's got people telling him that he's the Mahdi. What does he care about interfaith dialogue? He'll convert us by the sword, or he'll convert us one way or another. That's his goal. Don't fool yourself. He said so. Why don't you start taking people at their word? And what they say, take what they say seriously, and just figure that might be what they're actually doing. Erdogan and his people have been talking about the new Ottoman Empire for a long time. They're very open about it, but nobody wants to think that they had actually established an empire. Well, why wouldn't they? That's what they want. Just because you're used to the West, and all the empires of the West are, oh, we're so sorry for doing that to the world. Well, something, the Arabs don't care. They had their empire. They don't care. So did the Turks. The Turks took over the Arab Empire in its completion. Their empire stretched from Morocco up into the Balkans, into Russia, overran Iran, went into Central Asia, and deep down into Somalia. They don't repent. They're not sorry they did it. Why do you think that they would want to do that? They want to make you think that it never happened. But then again, that's your perception. You because you're clueless, because you don't know your history, your perception's already warped. And for people who know their past, they're already ahead of you. Politics is perception. What do people think and what do people believe? What is the narrative that's actually accepted? See, that's the thing. An unaccepted narrative is just a narrative. And now it's full of holes. Well, it should be. It was full of holes to start with. I mean, there's holes in just about any narrative, and some of our perception is not going to be real. You know, this is just the way that our minds work. And we tend to kind of cover those things over instead of admitting that there's a hole there. Well, it's better to admit that there's a hole there and just really not look at it too much. I mean, that's what I do, or try to do. I'm sure that there's exceptions, you know, where I can't stand to have that hole. And that I would rather lie to myself and accept something else. But I try not to do that. I don't think it's a helpful way of thinking. But yeah, I'm sure I do. I'm human. But to know, to actually have knowledge there, is better than to fill it in with a idiot story or a continual narrative that just doesn't really reflect reality. All models fail sooner or later, and it's probably just really simply because models are not the thing. But we also want to keep in mind that there are real facts, and those facts are there. And and we are constantly surprised by what we find underneath the veil, but, you know, we shouldn't be. There's a lot of things that are being hidden there. And there's a lot of facts that we don't really deal with. It is possible to understand that the narrative that everyone accepts is what's going to be acted upon. But it's also good to keep in mind that there are real facts that underlie this that are going to tear that narrative apart somewhere down the road. Keep those things in mind. I applaud what the president has done politically, but I don't applaud what he did as far as the short-term, at least, effect of throwing over the idea of peace in the Middle East. I have a hard time accepting that. But I also recognize that I don't know everything that he does. Consequently, I recognize the necessity of Machiavellian politics. I do recognize that. I always have. Doesn't mean I have to like it. So until next time.